Welcome to the Deep Dive. We're here to unpack complex sources and give you the key insights. Today, we're really digging into President Mirziyoyev's visit to the United States back in September 2025, looking at the institutional, the economic, and, well, the diplomatic weight of it all. And, this wasn't just a standard handshake tour, not at all. The picture painted by our sources is intense. Think a 3-day business marathon. The focus, purely on locking down massive investment. And the numbers, well, they're pretty staggering. Something like 50 meetings in just 72 hours.
That's right. And it culminated in this huge project portfolio valued at an astonishing $105 billion.
Wow. $105 billion.
It's definitely the number grabbing headlines globally. But the really interesting part, the story behind the number, is how it proves a concept. It really shows that the consistent and sometimes pretty tough internal reforms Uzbekistan's been undertaking for, 7 years now? They directly result in these kinds of hard external investment commitments.
So not just about promises anymore.
Exactly. This isn't about goodwill gestures. It's about credibility that's been earned through actual performance.
And that commitment was made really personal, wasn't it?
Yeah.
I mean, the sources pull out this quote where the president basically signals this shift, moving away from just making promises to, being measured by results. He actually said, "I personally guarantee the success of American companies' activities in Uzbekistan."
And that kind of personal guarantee, well, it only really lands. It only has weight because there's a solid institutional foundation built underneath it. In high-stakes investment, a leader's word, sure, it's valuable, but the structural stability, that's priceless.
Right.
So that statement, it acts almost like the ultimate reassurance for investors, saying, look, accountability here goes right to the very top.
Makes sense.
And for those big institutional investors, the ones writing the huge checks, risk assessment is always step one, always. And if you look at the key indicators, the things that attract serious capital, well, Uzbekistan has shifted things dramatically since 2017. The economy's actually doubled in size.
Doubled in just 7 years. That's massive growth for an established nation. Almost unheard of, really.
It is significant growth. And crucially, the annual flow of foreign direct investment, FDI, it's grown 10 times over that same period. Tenfold.
Right.
And even bilateral trade, just with the USA, that's up 4 times in 8 years. So these figures, they aren't just abstract numbers. They demonstrate consistency, predictability, and importantly, risk reduction. That's why the risk premium for international firms looking to operate there is shrinking.
Okay, so let's unpack how they manage that. How did they make that shift happen? The sources get into some specifics, the enabling reforms, right?
Yeah.
Designed to just cut through all that red tape.
Exactly.
They mentioned deep tax liberalization, simplification, removing hundreds of bureaucratic barriers, simplifying how you register a business. When we talk about removing hundreds of barriers, what does that actually mean practically? Say for a big company like General Motors wanting to set up.
It means the basic cost in terms of time and compliance effort has just plummeted. Historically, in many emerging economies, you'd face these incredibly complex tax codes, layers upon layers of old, maybe Soviet-era licensing requirements, stuff that could just stall a major project for months, even years.
Right. Total gridlock.
Total gridlock. So removing hundreds of those isn't just tinkering, it's a very conscious policy decision, a choice to shift away from a centrally controlled, often discretionary system towards one that's predictable, transparent, and market-driven.
So the real push wasn't for, temporary tax holidays, but for cleaning up the permanent structure.
That's the core of it, structural reform.
And to really lock in that trust, especially for American investors, they created a new mechanism, something structural.
Precisely. And this really signals institutional maturity. They appointed a dedicated deputy minister just for U.S. affairs, sitting within the Ministry of Investment. Now, this isn't just a symbolic handshake, it's a dedicated channel. It offers, reportedly, 247 support and accompaniment for American investors.
247 support. Wow.
It institutionalizes the relationship. It ensures there's a high-level, easily accessible person you can go to, an escalation path, really, to help move things from policy on paper to, smooth operational reality on the ground.
Yeah, that kind of dedicated, always-on support has got to be a huge selling point, especially if you're a firm moving into a completely new market.
Yeah.
Okay, so with that foundation kind of laid out, let's look at where this $105 billion is actually flowing. The sources map it out across 4 priority sectors, right? And each one seems to validate that reform credibility we've been talking about. So pillar 1, mineral resources. The sources say Uzbekistan has enormous reserves of critically important minerals. And a key move here was adopting a new law on subsoil, making sure it lines up with international standards. Now, for listeners maybe not deep in mining policy, why is just updating a mining law such a big deal? Why is that such a guarantee for investors like, say, Cove Capital or SLB?
Well, because without clear, stable laws, investing in mining becomes incredibly risky. It often relies too much on government discretion, not the rule of law. The older systems, they often lacked transparency on licensing, on rights.
Fair.
So this modernized law on subsoil, it establishes clear, predictable rules for getting licenses. It secures property rights over the deposits you find. And it uses internationally recognized contract standards. For companies whose whole business is extracting and then processing these strategic raw materials, often involving huge upfront costs, that transparency, that guarantee they can actually extract value and build sustainable supply chains, it's absolutely non-negotiable.
Got it. Okay, moving to Pillar 2, technology and IT. Clearly a big priority. They've pushed digitalization, created these IT parks across the country, and residents in these parks are exempt from all taxes.
Yeah.
That seems unusually generous on a global scale.
It is a very strong incentive, yes. And you see the investment flowing in reflects that. Alongside global tech trends, you've got the Fund for Reconstruction and Development teaming up with Biologic International, creating funds aimed specifically at AI and biotech projects.
Cutting-edge stuff.
Absolutely. And crucially, they're not just focusing on the new tech, they're modernizing the core financial plumbing, too.
Yeah.
BlackRock's involved in setting up a joint investment fund. And you mentioned Franklin Templeton, they're working with NASDAQ to upgrade the Tashkent Stock Exchange.
Right, the NASDAQ partnership.
Mm-hmm.
That detail feels really significant. What does it actually mean for a local stock exchange to be sort of validated or modernized by a huge Western player like NASDAQ? What does that signal?
It signals a commitment to high standards. Standards for liquidity, for corporate governance, for transparency in trading. NASDAQ's involvement isn't just about selling them some new software, it's essentially a stamp of regulatory confidence. It helps ensure the exchange operates with the kind of integrity that institutional investors expect. It helps move it beyond, the riskier frontier market label and makes it more attractive for serious long-term capital.
Okay, that makes sense. Pillar 3 then, infrastructure. They're really pushing large projects using public-private partnerships, PPPs. Could you just quickly explain for our listeners, what's the key financial mechanism a PPP offers that maybe traditional government funding doesn't?
Sure. So a PPP basically allows private companies to step in and finance, build, and often operate essential public infrastructure, things like roads, power plants, water systems, airports. They then recoup their significant upfront investment over a long period, often decades, through things like concession fees or user charges.
So it takes the immediate financial burden off the government.
Exactly. It shifts a large part of the initial capital risk from the government's budget onto the private sector partners. But in return, it offers those investors stable, predictable, long-term revenue streams. And this PPP framework, this model, is what underpinned that huge deal with Boeing we heard about for 14 new 787 Dreamliners, with options for more. And it's also bringing in specialist partners in areas like aviation finance, like Oppenheimer.
Right, the Boeing deal was huge news. Okay, and finally, Pillar 4, the agro-industrial complex, agriculture. Now, this sector, even though it's massive in Uzbekistan historically, often gets less international spotlight, right?
Mm-hmm.
The sources say it's undergoing a deep transformation. What are the critical changes happening there, beyond just, say, bringing in smart farming tech?
Well, the really key transformation is moving decisively away from the old state-directed model, which was heavily reliant, almost defined by cotton production for decades. The focus now is shifting towards genuine land reform, allowing farmers to choose market-driven crops, and crucially, implementing modern processing technologies within Uzbekistan to capture more value.
Adding value locally, not just exporting raw materials.
Precisely. And importantly, they're bringing in American agri-tech expertise, particularly around long-standing challenges like water management in the region. The goal is to make agriculture a sustainable, high-value export sector, not just a source of basic commodities.
Okay, so across all 4 pillars, you see this blend of policy reform and targeted investment.
And the sheer level of engagement seen in New York really validates this whole approach. We're talking about more than 300 American companies that have already put money into Uzbekistan across all these sectors we've discussed. Critical minerals, IT, finance, pharma, manufacturing.
Yeah, the list of attendees at that September 22nd Business Roundtable reads like a who's who of global business. You mentioned Citigroup, BlackRock, Boeing, Franklin Templeton, also Nvidia, Visa, MasterCard, McKinsey, even the Cleveland Clinic and General Motors.
Yeah.
When you get institutions of that stature all in the same room, focused on one country, it really suggests they're buying into the idea that these structural changes are real and, more importantly, lasting.
It signals deep confidence in the trajectory.
And the political validation seemed pretty direct, too. President Trump was quoted calling the overall deal $105 billion. That's very good. And he referred to President Mirziyoyev as a man of his word. Now, does that kind of high-level political endorsement actually translate into more sustained investment? Or is it mainly diplomatic politeness?
Oh, it's highly significant. That kind of top-level political blessing, it basically validates the safety of the overall framework. It sends a powerful signal, especially to the maybe more cautious segments of the American business world that says, look, this relationship is strategically sound, it's endorsed,
Yep.
and you have to remember the mutual benefit aspect. That single Boeing deal, just on its own, is projected to create something like 35,000 jobs right here in the USA. So that anchors the economic relationship in shared growth, shared employment. It's not a one-way street.
Right, good point. Let's maybe shift focus slightly to the leadership aspect here.
Mm-hmm.
That schedule, 50 meetings in 72 hours, it sounds absolutely relentless. Was that pace primarily designed to signal a sense of urgency? Or was it more of a logistical necessity, just trying to cram everything into one trip to maximize deal closures?
I think it's fair to say it was very much an intentional signal. A signal of urgency, yes, but also of a delivery-driven leadership style.
Hmm.
In many emerging markets, getting direct access to the ultimate decision maker can often be the fastest way to cut through the remaining bureaucratic hurdles that reforms might still be working to clear out further down the system.
So hands-on leadership.
Very hands-on. It's an approach that clearly communicates to investors, we are serious about this, we are personally invested, and we are moving quickly.
And when asked about why there was so much interest, President Mirziyoyev apparently connected that intense personal work ethic directly to the nation's credibility. The quote was, "We proved that the Uzbek people fulfill what they promise." It really links that personal drive to the government's whole shift towards, as you said, performance-measured governance.
Absolutely. And that focus clearly extends to the next generation, too. There was quite an emotional, forward-looking message he delivered when speaking to Uzbek students who were studying in America. He told them something like, "Know one thing. Our historic meetings yesterday will open many opportunities for you tomorrow." It directly ties all that high-level economic diplomacy back to their future prosperity.
Powerful message.
So if we're synthesizing this institutional transformation, what we really need to emphasize again is that the commitment investors are showing, it's built fundamentally on predictability. The confidence isn't coming from temporary handouts or short-term incentives. It's rooted in those deep structural reforms.
Or the real bedrock.
Exactly. Removing those hundreds of bureaucratic barriers we talked about, providing explicit legal protection for all foreign investors, modernizing key foundational laws like the law on subsoil, and of course providing that dedicated 247 institutional support channel we discussed.
So these aren't just tweaks around the edges. These are permanent changes to the rules of the game, designed to guarantee long-term stability for capital.
Precisely. These reforms aim to build that long-term predictability right into Uzbekistan's core economic growth model. And that predictability is ultimately why you see financial giants like Citigroup, BNY Mellon, BlackRock being willing to deploy significant capital, thinking in terms of decades, not just the next few years. They're essentially banking on structural stability enduring. And in global investment today, that stability is probably the most valuable currency there is.
And looking ahead, it seems this diplomatic momentum isn't slowing down. Sergio Gore, the U.S. President's special envoy for South and Central Asian affairs, actually confirmed that President Trump is waiting for President Mirziyoyev in Washington.
Yeah, and that's significant because it signals this is viewed as an evolving strategic partnership, not just a one-off success or a single transactional visit. It aligns Uzbekistan more closely with the broader U.S. strategy for stability and connectivity in Central Asia. The reports say the president specifically agreed to pay special attention to economic cooperation going forward and to form a serious portfolio of long-term projects.
So we can expect more.
I think we can anticipate cooperation deepening further, especially in areas highlighted by the recent agreements: capital markets development, those critical minerals supply chains, probably more green infrastructure through PPPs, and definitely in advanced technology like AI and biotech.
So this whirlwind visit wasn't really the finish line, was it? It sounds more like the launch pad for a continued high-level strategic engagement.
I think that's exactly the right way to look at it. Ultimately, the September visit, it really stands as a culmination of 7 solid years of consistent reform efforts. And it's a powerful testament to the leadership's credibility. When a government consistently makes structural promises and then actually follows through year after year, the world does eventually take notice, and capital follows that confidence.
Okay, so just to wrap up and leave you, our listeners, with some key takeaways, those hard numbers again.
Yeah.
The total project portfolio announced hit that headline figure, $105 billion.
Astonishing number.
The U.S. jobs created just from the Boeing deal alone, projected at over 35,000. The number of American firms now active in Uzbekistan, over 300. And those core economic indicators since 2017, the economy has doubled, FDI is up tenfold, and trade specifically with the U.S. has quadrupled.
The trajectory is undeniable.
So a final thought to leave you with.
Well, I think this visit really confirms a fundamental point, that sustained, credible reform doesn't just improve domestic conditions, it actively transforms global perception. It turns potential into partnership. It secures access to a rapidly growing market where, importantly, the commitment is guaranteed right from the top, and it's backed by increasingly mature institutions. So the ultimate takeaway for UNEP be this: policy credibility earned today by strategic partnership and economic opportunity tomorrow.